My name is Michael Holland. I am the Director of Counseling at Hinsdale South, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our financial aid question and answer session. As we get started here, I'm going to allow our panelists who are here to just very briefly introduce themselves. And, I'm going to give some context for the evening, and then we'll begin with Frank Palmistani having a very brief presentation before we take your questions. So for Hank and Frank, if you could both give yourself just a very brief introduction.
Go ahead, Mr. Eubanks.
Okay, hello. My name is Hank Eubanks. I am a counselor at Hinsdale South High School, involved very directly in helping students with the financial aid process and navigating through it. I worked very closely with Mr. Palmistani, who's our tonight's speaker, and I'm very proud to consider myself a Frank Palmistani disciple when it comes to financial aid.
Hello, my name is Frank Palmistani, and believe it or not, I know you think I'm a lot younger, but this is my 45th year in education. And I was at Hinsdale South High School for 21 glorious years working with these guys and a number of other colleagues, and every minute of that time. So this is my 35th year of doing presentations. Obviously, this year's presentations was so much different because it was done through the media as opposed to live and in person. But hopefully we can help you with Q&A, and I'll cover a couple of key points before we get started as well. There are a few colleges that are also here tonight that are going to assist me in the Q&A and have been kind enough to partner with us in this process. I don't know if, Brian, you're capable of saying a few things, but Brian Hotzfield is here from St. Xavier. Molly Kramer is here from St. Ambrose. Veronica Urso is here from the University of Tampa, I believe. So I see Molly. Molly, you want to say hello?
Hi, everyone. My name is Molly Kramer. I am an admissions counselor at St. Ambrose University. I'm happy to help tonight and answer all of your questions.
And Brian, you want to say hello?
Hello, everyone. My name is Brian Hotzfield, Director of Admission at St. Xavier University. Happy to be here and happy to help sponsor Frank's presentations.
And Veronica, are you there somewhere?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Veronica. I'm the admissions counselor at the University of Tampa, originally from the Chicagoland area, and thank you for having me.
Great. So, Mike, are you going to do some things first before I start?
Yeah, let me cover a couple topics and we'll kick it to you, okay, Frank?
Great.
All right. So for everybody, just kind of know, we'll have the contact information for all our panelists. I have it up there right now. I'll put it up at the end of the presentation. So if you wanted to reach out to anybody with an individual concern that you don't want to share with the big group, that would be fine. I'm going to skip that. I do want to let you know that FAFSA, which is the primary financial aid document through our federal government, we'll address a little bit tonight. Completing FAFSA is now a graduation requirement in the state of Illinois. So this is brand new for the class of 2021, but it adds a little extra gravity. You got to complete this form to maximize your financial aid opportunities for your child to pursue college after high school. And now it's a graduation requirement from our State Board of Education. So I did want everyone to have that piece of information. Also, tonight is very informational. Frank is a regional expert and someone who's very well respected, who's going to deliver great information. For a more hands-on approach to helping you complete your FAFSA, we have an event called FAFSA Completion Night that'll be coming up in October 14th. The FAFSA opens October 1st, so that'll give you some time to maybe try on your own. If you had questions, you could pop into our FAFSA Completion Night for extra help. And lastly, I wanted to just give some context on how we hoped this night would work. Frank was kind enough to pre-record his typical financial aid presentation that goes into more depth of all the content. It's available on demand on YouTube. We sent you this link by email about a month ago. I know you're getting a lot of emails from District 86, so that may have been lost in the wash. We will send it out again. It's been at happenings as well, but if you have a chance to sit down for an hour and really engage with the content, this is a good opportunity. And then tonight is more about question and answer. So Frank's going to give a kind of condensed version of his talk, just as a primer on some important topics. And then we're going to do question answer. So the way that you submit questions is this little icon that looks like a little circle, like a little call out button, a chat. When you submit a question via chat, it comes only to the panelists. So no other attendees see it. And then Mr. Eubanks and I are going to moderate the question and answer, and either Mr. Palmisani will answer it or one of our college admissions guests who generously donated their time to be here tonight as well. So that's it for me kind of setting the stage. So I will stop sharing so people can get a better view of all the panelists, and we'll go from there. So Frank, it's all yours.
Thanks so much, Mike. So a couple of points of synthesis, I think, in the presentation that hopefully you all saw. And I might point out at the bottom of the presentation were all of the links for the handouts. And so if you haven't actually generated those handouts, it would be good at some point to do that. Because the first aspect that I talk about are all of the different ways that sticker prices can be reduced. And of course, that's a handout. So that's important for you to understand that everything is comprehensive in nature when it comes to actually the calculation of what your out-of-pocket costs will be. And you want that overview. So that's how we started. And then we went into this concept that I call the planning phase. Now, the planning phase occurs any point in time prior to actual execution, right? And so you're planning as a sophomore, a freshman, a junior parent, certainly even now as a senior parent, you can go through this concept of the planning phase. Well, what were the key points to that? Well, one of the key points was use net price calculators. These are planning tools. The other key point to that is look at a variety of different colleges and colleges in different categories, because that's where you're going to see the pricing differences. And of course, the other key point of the planning phase was your ability to communicate with your son or daughter to integrate financial fit, the financial reality, with those things that are more academic related or atmosphere or feel. We call it field fit related. So it's that integration that's so important, and that's all a part of the planning phase. And then, of course, for parents of seniors, it's the month of October that you're actually going through the execution phase. We are actually having to complete FAFSA in order to get to what we call column 3. Remember, in the planning phase, I talk about this 3-column chart. The first column is the identification of the college's sticker prices. The second column is the identification of the approximate net prices, what we could anticipate you paying. And then column 3 is your actual out-of-pocket cost. That's what you want to get to. That's why you want to make your college cost comparisons. But you can't do that until you complete every aspect of the execution phase. And again, there was a handout on that. So a lot of handouts to help you through the process. That's the overview. And now we'll take any questions that you might have.
All right, Frank, as parents are submitting their questions, I'm wondering if we could, for parents who are very new to the process, perhaps this is their first child, if you could give kind of simple definition of, we've thrown around a couple acronyms so far, like FAFSA or estimated family contribution. If you could cover those.
Sure.
We have some parent questions coming in. We'll just give them some time to think, and you can cover those very basics for first timers.
Sure, absolutely. So if you recall from, again, the video itself, the free application for federal student aid, that's the document. This is the document that everyone needs to file in the month of October. Mr. Holland had mentioned earlier that there was going to be a completion night, right? So this is a night that Hinsdale is offering so that you can indeed make sure that you file that document correctly. One of the things I mentioned in the seminar is that you have the opportunity to list up to 10 different colleges on that document. And in my judgment, everyone should do that. Everyone should find 10 schools, because this is one of the elements that triggers that eventual award letter. Now, it's not the only element that you use the award letter. There's the EFC. This is the expected family contribution. That's the end result calculation to the FAFSA. That'll go to the colleges. Then the colleges also need transcripts so that they can use information like a GPA, and maybe they would use a test score this year, but we know a lot of colleges are test optional. But it's those elements that will actually develop this, what we call award letter. Now, if the timing's right, and you're the parent of a senior, and you're filing the document in October, and your sons and daughters are applying to schools up through maybe all of the first semester, it may be as early as January, February, March that you'll get these award letters. You know, I'm going to defer to each of the college reps for a second. And I'd like to ask them this question. What has been the timing of your award letters over the last couple of years now that we've gone to the prior method where families are filing FAFSAs in October? Brian, could you answer that initially?
Sure. We shoot for November 1st as the first wave of financial aid award letters hitting the mail. And then obviously it's a rolling basis after that. So if a student and family is admitted to the university, files the FAFSA in early October, shortly thereafter in early November, we'll start sending those award letters.
So that's pretty amazing. It's probably the earliest I've heard of school that gets those out that quickly. How do we do at St. Ambrose?
Yeah, we're not far behind Brian. Any student that is admitted and files their FAFSA typically in just the month of October is the best time for us. We typically start sending financial aid packages out end of November, early December. So not too far behind Brian.
Yeah, that's terrific. University of Tampa?
Yeah, I'm going to echo Molly and Brian on this. And then as people start completing it later on, it'll be then, and then it'll be posted online in the portal. If they don't complete the FAFSA towards the beginning and they complete it later on, it'll be displayed on the portal. So around the same time frame.
Great. Thanks so much. So, you know, what you're going to see is an assortment of different colleges responding differently. Some will batch the information, but it's great to be able to get this out-of-pocket cost sometime in the months, even January, February, because remember, your deadline to make a college decision is not until May 1st. So as you remember from the seminar, I talk about this kitchen table. Theoretically, you could have multiple awards sitting on your kitchen table in January and February, giving you time to really assess what are the best places academically, what are the best places from a field standpoint, and what are the best places financially before you have to make that May 1st decision. All right, questions from the audience, if there are any, Mike?
Yeah, we've got a bunch of questions that have rolled in. Well, I'll start with the first one. Mr. Eubanks, you can get the next one, okay? So today we actually gave the SAT to our seniors at Hinsdale Central and Hinsdale South. And gosh, we had almost all of our seniors there. Senior families are understandably concerned about getting test scores very late in the application process. So the question here is, for students who haven't taken an ACT or SAT, or don't have that score by the time they apply for admission and file FAFSA, is that going to delay when they find out their real out-of-pocket cost or their academic scholarships? So I think this is probably more for the college panelists. But will lack of a test score or a delayed test score impact the merit award process for you?
I'll jump in. I'm happy for each of the colleges to give their perspective, but I will jump in with this. All of the schools that I have spoken with have indicated to me that they have found a way to determine their merit-based scholarships, assuming if the student is test optional, they don't have a test score, that those still will go out. So the students will not be placed at a disadvantage if they do not submit a test score. But let's open it up to the three schools and see what their perspective is.
Yeah, I can jump in and speak on behalf of St. Ambrose. Our process this year, like Frank said, a lot of schools, we are test optional. So our first batch of admissions decisions has gone out September 1st, and we operate on a rolling basis. So currently, all we need is a student's GPA, and they are welcome to submit an ACT or SAT test score throughout the upcoming next months through March 1st of their senior year. At that time, if they are already admitted, it can potentially increase their academic scholarship, but at St. Ambrose, it's never going to hurt them. And as far as the FAFSA goes, as far as the timeline with admission, my recommendation, if the school is not test optional and you are waiting on a test score to come in for admission purposes, still file nice and early. So when you do get that admit letter in the mail, they can pull your FAFSA information in as well in that time frame. So any schools you're looking at, if you're still waiting on an admissions decision or they're still coming out a little bit later, or you definitely need to take that test score, it's always good to err on the side of file the FAFSA, include that school. So when that admission letter does come through, you're not behind in the process at that time.
Thank you, Molly. Brian?
Very similar to Molly. Our first admission letters start hitting the mail a little bit later than St. Ambrose, maybe around October 1st. We are test optional, so we can admit a student based on high school grade performance, issue a merit scholarship. If a student has filed the FAFSA, obviously we'll put a financial aid award letter together. If by chance the student takes the ACT or SAT later in the year and feels that their that their score is justifies perhaps a higher scholarship than they were awarded, we'll absolutely have a conversation. I think one of the key points in Frank's video is the idea of being able to have a conversation with each individual college and exploring any potential options after you've received that initial financial aid award letter.
Veronica, you have any thoughts you want to share on that?
Yeah, just a tad different at UT. We will only evaluate merit scholarships at one point. So we are test optional. However, we are discouraging submitting test scores because they are not going to hold any weight in an admissions decision or a merit scholarship. So we'll just be looking at GPA and course rigor to determine eligibility. We don't need the test scores.
Great, thanks so much. And so, for the attendees, you've got 3 schools' perspectives, but I would say, again, from the colleges that I've spoken to this year, many schools are following that same pattern.
Okay. Frank, I have another question. Someone asked, are scholarships separate from financial aid award letters?
So typically this is what happens. And again, if you maybe review the presentation, you get a sense of this. Well, usually the timing works like this. A student will apply for admission to a particular school, and then obviously transcripts will be sent. So the college will evaluate the rigor of the courses, the GPA. In the past, the test scores were included, but this year, not as much. They will often issue a merit-based academic scholarship at that point. Now, one of the things I mentioned in the seminar is that view that as kind of an opening salvo to the process. So this is one little piece of what eventually will get to your out-of-pocket cost. For example, there may be opportunity for other competitive scholarships at that same institution. There might be talent-based scholarships at that same institution. And once the FAFSA's in, there could be need-based awards, whether it comes from government entities or it comes from the institution itself. So it's kind of a 2-piece process. You may very often get this merit scholarship early on, and that'll be a part of the eventual award, but you shouldn't assume that that's the only element of your award. You won't know that until you complete the FAFSA and obviously get your complete comprehensive financial aid award in the back end. And as Brian was alluding to, remember in the presentation I talked about the appeal process. And that's the possibility of actually getting an award going back to the institution with other information, appealable information, where there might even be an award that's altered. So it's a continuum. It starts out often with acceptance and getting the initial merit scholarship, but more resources could be included along the way.
Frank, can I piggyback on that concept of an appeal? This is another question. Someone asked, can you appeal a financial decision? And if so, how does that work?
Very good. I love talking about the appeal process because it's so important. And the way I describe it in the seminar is for you to understand appeals, you have to understand what the FAFSA is and what it's not. What it is a snapshot of your financial situation. It is not a comprehensive analysis of your financial situation. So you go through the FAFSA and a computation is going to be made, right? It's called EFC. You'll get an EFC number. That number will be transmitted to colleges. That number is based on the income from the tax return that they want. So the parents of seniors, it's that adjusted gross income from 2019. And your savings and investments, assets, at the time that you file the document. So that calculation will occur. Now, what if, for example, your income in the future is less than the income that you present? Some people, because of COVID, have lost income. That's an appealable item. What if you have healthcare expenses, medical expenses, high insurance premiums, any of these kinds of costs? That can be an appealable item. What if you have other children and you have other educational costs connected to those other children? That could be an appealable item. So the point is you appeal directly to the colleges. FAFSA goes into a system, right? You list the schools, but the appeals go directly to the colleges themselves. And that's up to the colleges to review those appeals and assess whether or not the award letter could be altered for your benefit.
All right, Frank, the next question is there a specific advantage to filing the FAFSA early, like as soon as you can once it comes out, versus is there a disadvantage to wait?
So this is not a first come, first served system. It is a system based on eligibility, but obviously there's a caveat there. There is no logic to prolonging the time, or procrastinating the time to file it. It doesn't mean that you have to file it on October 1, but it seems logical to me that sometime in the month of October, if you're the parent of a senior, you do file it. And I do want to point something out. The parent of a senior files in the month of October. You cannot file FAFSA prior to that. So some parents thinking, oh, I want to get it down early, are actually looking at FAFSA and thinking, I could do it now. Well, it's not even the correct FAFSA that's out yet. It won't come out until October 1. So you've got to file the correct one, and it is the month of October. There have been circumstances in the state of Illinois where a particular program, a program that I defined in my seminar called MAP, this is the state grant program, and there was a timeline connected to that. In other words, funds, they ran out of funds. And when they run out of funds, they cut off the date. Anybody who files a FAFSA after a certain date doesn't become eligible or gets money reduced. And usually that date is in January. So the logic to me is get it done, if you can, in the month of October.
Okay, next question, Frank. How does home equity get counted or retirement funds?
Okay, very good question. And I want to expand that a little bit and talk about assets in general if I can. I'm going to go back to the ideas of the seminar. Remember, when we're recording savings and investments, you're recording it based on the day that you actually file the form. What is the value of these savings and investments? Now, just about everything has to be recorded, but the equity of the home is not recorded in FAFSA, and the value of any retirement accounts are not recorded. So if you have money in a personal Roth account, an IRA, a 401k, an annuity, a pension profit sharing plan, none of these are listed as assets on the document. Now, when they view assets, understand they're not like adding all of your assets into this EFC number. If it's a parent asset, there's a lot of it protected. They call it the asset protection allowance. Think of it as an emergency cash fund. So that won't be included in this EFC. But when you go beyond the allowance, which is an internal calculation, it's only about a 4-5% addition to the EFC that comes out of those assets. Now, student assets get whacked hard, though. If you do have money under the Social Security number of the student, there is no money protected, and that gets whacked pretty hard. 20-25% gets added to the EFC. So a lot of people have 529 plans. And when you have 529 plans, those should always be listed as a parent asset. And that's actually better for you. Now, a question that often comes up is, should I worry about my assets? Should I think about where those assets are positioned? Does it make sense to do things with my investments prior to the time I file the form? Well, understand, these are your savings and investments. You can do anything you want with them. That's your say-so. The document calls for you to file what those assets are the day you file. But don't do it in a vacuum. Use the net price calculators as planning tools. So the design of the net price calculator isn't that the information's going anywhere. It's for your benefit. So when you put your savings and investments in a net price calculator, if you're concerned that, that might impact your net price, look at it and then change the savings and investment number if you were to reposition it, for example, in a category that would not be recorded, and then see if it has any impact on the net price. And if it doesn't, then obviously you don't have to worry about it because it wouldn't impact it. And oftentimes it doesn't, but it is good for you to play with those net price calculators to get a sense of that.
So a question that kind of builds on what you just spoke about with assets is the question was, if you have a high EFC or have a significant amount of money in a 529 plan, would that adversely impact your chances of earning a merit-based scholarship at a college?
Right, and the answer to that is no. So typically when you think about what the EFC does, and this is very important, people oftentimes think I'm not going to get any assistance because I know I'm going to have a high EFC. Think about what the EFC actually does. The EFC is a trigger for programs. So if the EFC is really low, 6,000 or lower, that's a trigger for a Pell Grant. If the EFC is 9,000 or lower and the student goes to a school in Illinois, that's a trigger for a state grant. If the EFC is lower than the cost of the institution, there might be need-based money from the college. But there are other methods of receiving resources: merit-based scholarships for academics, athletic money, talent for music, art, theater, what have you, competitive scholarships, sibling scholarships. All of these other possibilities could exist. And when we talk about the first page of the handout, that analysis of every way that sticker prices can be reduced, there's only a couple of those programs that are directly impacted by the EFC number. All the others are not. So the answer to the question is no, it doesn't impact the merit side.
Yes, Frank, a question just came in. What if a 529 is in a grandparent's name?
Great question. I'm glad it was asked. This is often a confusing element for families. So the document is looking for student information and parent information. That's all the document wants. So if a grandparent has money that is going to be used for the benefit of the student, it's like the college saying, we don't really care who pays for college. We don't really, we're going to submit this bill to you after the award, and how you come up with that money is your business, right? And so ultimately, if the money is taken from a grandparent account, well, fine. That doesn't get listed on the document as an asset.
All right, a question here, Frank, that says, what are the best websites to use to identify and apply to outside scholarships?
Okay, really, really good question as well.
Actually, before you answer, Frank, can I add just the Hinsdale South?
Please do. Yeah, please do, Mike.
Yeah, so there's a couple, we put outside private scholarships into a couple different categories at Hinsdale South. And one would be that we call the extremely local scholarships that are about the 40 different awards that our students win every year. There's a DYC award, there's a Women's Club of Hinsdale award, all these different things. We emailed to every senior and their parents a link to a survey where you could check off the ones we think apply to you and submit it. When those applications come in, we would automatically distribute them to your student so that you could apply. So we know that our students win those awards every year. So that is the best place to start when you're looking for those private scholarship monies. We also have a website, a link on our Hinsdale South website for regional scholarships that are more like countywide or statewide scholarship programs. We have, maybe a potentially better shot at securing some funds through. When you're kind of setting the priority, it would be like the local, regional, and then potentially a national database, like a FastWeb. But Frank, I'd love to hear anything that you have to say on that as well.
No, that's really perfect, Mike. And your setup is exactly helpful. It's very helpful to families, because my experience has been one of the problems that so many students encounter when they pursue independent scholarships is information overload. They literally get deluged with possibilities. If they were to go to a national database like FastWeb, they could literally get an email every day, apply for this one, this one, and this one, and this one. And it gets to the point where they don't know where to start. The fact that you have an organizational system in place is perfect. And I would highly encourage all the parents who are here tonight to have their sons and daughters not miss any of the opportunities that are in that local arena. That's the smallest competitive pool. Spend most of your energy and time right there.
All right, one, you got it, Mr. Eubanks?
No, I don't. I had another one. This one came in early on, where someone was interested to know where you could find the handouts from your presentation.
Sure. So in the actual presentation itself, at the bottom of the presentation, all of the links to all of the handouts are available. So if they were to go back to the presentation itself, the YouTube presentation, all of those links are available. I think there's something that you might have to click that says see more or something like that at the bottom, but all the handouts are there in the presentation itself.
And just for everyone, I just put the link to the YouTube of Frank's seminar into the chat for everyone. And it's in the description of the YouTube video. There's several links to all of his different handouts. So if you haven't checked out the YouTube yet, it's there in the chat for everyone.
And if I could also point out, we have these wonderful 4 college partners, and their links are there as well. There's links in there for their videos and opportunities for you to learn more about their institutions.
All right, so there was also a question that came in about the University of Illinois Promise program, that for parents who earn less than $67,000 a year and have no assets, that it would be tuition free.
Yes.
So they're just asking, the question is there some kind of hidden catch there, or what are the details around those state of Illinois university programs?
No, this is something that's relatively new. It popped up just a couple of years ago at the University of Illinois. And I would say if families have a low adjusted gross income, I think it's $65,000, if I'm not mistaken, in relationship to free tuition, and the student qualifies for admission at the University of Illinois, certainly is a competitive enough student that they could potentially be admitted. That's certainly not something to sneeze at. I mean, that's a nice potential benefit. And so taking advantage of that would be terrific. Now, I will point out that when you look at that award, okay, they're going to create this free tuition and use potentially other resources, but that's fine. At least you know that what you have is a free tuition opportunity there. And of course, families would still be paying room and board, but ultimately that can be a nice benefit.
All right, here it's another question that we get quite frequently, and it's a tough one. There's not a firm answer to this, but I would love your expert opinion. How do families identify what an appropriate amount of student debt is?
Yes, great. So one of the things that I think we have to be very conscious of is that we had, if you remember, if you go back to my opening slide in the presentation, I showed the 20-year history of debt and how debt is increased on the student side, how debt is increased on the parent side. Now, obviously, the main focus of the presentation is to try to pay for college without excessive debt, right? But and ultimately, that's a kind of a personal assessment that a family has to make. We know that if a student borrows the maximums using the direct loan program, $5,500 freshman year, $6,500 sophomore year, $7,500 each of junior and senior years, that comprehensive debt is less than $30,000, and the interest rate currently is the lowest it's been in the 35 years that I've been doing this. So this is an incredibly attractive time if you're going to borrow to utilize that program. Now, it's also low in other borrowing options. So the PLUS loan is the lowest that it's been. Consumer loans are lower. Home equity loans are lower. Alternative student loans are lower. So, you have to weigh this. So what might have been excessive debt 2 years ago maybe is not that excessive to your family today in terms of how much debt you're going to incur because the interest rates are significantly lower than they've been. So all I would say is it's an individual judgment. I do have that page in the handouts about trying to assess your yearly affordability by encouraging families to ask themselves certain questions. And maybe that'll be helpful to you, but it is something you have to kind of judge yourself. And I'm going to just defer maybe to the colleges if you have any insights on that this question with the three schools, and any of you could comment on this. When parents need to borrow, do you typically present the PLUS loan as a part of the award? Or do you talk about that as an element of actually managing your college cost? Where does the parent loan to undergraduate students come in? Brian, could you jump in on that?
Sure. We do not include that parent PLUS loan in the initial financial aid award letter. Obviously, it's an option for students and families to talk with financial aid about and pursue if they'd like to do so. But just for the sake of transparency, we do not include that parent loan in the initial award letter.
Very good. Molly?
Yep, same for St. Ambrose. Parent PLUS loan is something that we talk about when we talk about the different types of loan options when we're going through the award letter with the family.
Great. And Veronica?
Yep, the University of Tampa operates the same.
Okay, great. Thank you. So ultimately, that's a really good kind of a boilerplate. The cleanest aid award letters you can get, families, are institutions that don't put the PLUS loan in the award. There will be some that do. But if you can eliminate that as part of the award and focus on the direct loan as part of the award, and then when you think about what your costs will actually be, if you have to borrow, there was a handout that is a part of the seminar on all of the methods of college borrowing. I always encourage people, assess each of those. You might choose the PLUS loan, but maybe not. Maybe you'll use a loan against your 401k plan, or maybe you'll use a loan against the equity of your home, or maybe you'll use an alternate student loan. These are all different options, and you just have to assess what's right for you.
All right, there is one that came in that is, do colleges give consideration for families that have twins going to college? Or I guess you could say twins or just multiple children in college at the same time.
Yes. So more than the family or the colleges get consideration, it's important to understand how it impacts the EFC. So if you think about what's happening here, you have a family who has a calculation done, calculation based on income and assets. But remember, each student, files the FAFSA with the parent. So if I had two in college at the same time, that means two FAFSAs would be filed. And for each FAFSA, I would be indicating how many people in the family in college? Two. So that means that this EFC number is going to be divided. So that lower EFC number could have an impact on aid eligibility at every institution. Now, in addition to that, might there be colleges that say, if two students go to the same school, will we create a discount? Well, that's an individual college's choice, but more significantly, the multiplication of the number of people in the family and college at the same time reduces the EFC number. And so theoretically, it could improve the award at any institution.
All right. And the last, a couple more just came in. So number one is, are there any, no, I think we've actually already answered this one. Apologize for that. So one question is, do schools still require ACT, SAT for scholarship consideration? So we've heard from the panel, at least from a couple panelists, that they're test optional. The person asking the question asks specifically about the Big Ten, University of Illinois, Purdue, Michigan State, the schools they name. I would actually ask Frank or Hank to comment on that. I know Mr. Eubanks went to a Big Ten seminar a couple weeks ago about specifically how different Big Ten schools are handling the lack of test scores this year.
Well, I will say that I attended a Big Ten webinar much like this, where the Big Ten schools all kind of gave a presentation about how they were going to, given the fact that many of our students were not able to take an ACT or SAT test, not only are they going to be flexible in test optional when it came to admission, but the vast majority of them are also going to be test optional and maybe in many cases test blind when it comes to taking merit-based aid as well. So what that basically means is that they're going to look at factors other than test scores in determining merit aid, things like grades and strength of schedule, compelling essays that the students may have written, things of that nature. They understand that many of our students were not able to test, simply just weren't able to test. It doesn't necessarily mean that you can't send the tests, and that they won't necessarily. Some of them were very fluid, and there's not a one size fit all kind of policy there. But that was the general message that came across from most of the institutions.
Yeah, if I could just jump in on this topic as well. One of the things that's a little challenging to families is that, every institution has kind of their average test scores historically. They call it the mid 50%. And so there's this big question, at what point do I have a test score that shouldn't get sent in? And at what point do I have a test score that should get sent in? We wish there was kind of a uniform test score. You could just tell families, if it's at this level or higher, send it. But you can't, because every institution has that different mid 50%. So at some institutions, I would want to send, I'll use the ACT as an example, a 25. And at other institutions, I might not want to do that. So it's just so tricky. You've got to kind of work with each of the admissions people. I think at least I'll ask the colleges to speak to this. When you're actually working with an individual family, my assumption is you want to try to help that family make the right choice for your institution. So would you be inclined to actually give them advice? Say, okay, what is your test score? I would encourage you to send it in. Or what is your test score? I would encourage you not to send it in. And I'll allow the colleges to kind of respond to that.
Sure, I'll go ahead and respond. So I think that I'm definitely in a position to be giving advice, but like I said, this test optional, it's a little bit trickier to navigate. And for the most current information that I've heard, we won't be weighing test scores at all. So my best advice is to not commit it because there is no point. It's not held any weight in merit or admission.
That's, in some ways that makes it easy. The University of Tampa is kind of saying they're not going to look at it at all. And so it's not going to be a consideration. That's probably a little bit of a unique institutional perspective, but it does make it easier for families. How about Brian and Molly?
So with St. Ambrose, we are test optional with some of our academic scholarships that are a little bit higher, that are potentially going to be, they're going to come from a higher GPA. And so we will need a test score for some of what we consider our premier scholarships. So if you have a really high GPA, it's probably going to be to your benefit to send us in a test score. And us admissions counselors, we are always happy if you send us an email, give us a call and say, this is what I'm sitting at and this is what my GPA is. We'll calculate it out ahead of time before you even send it our way. But the biggest thing for us is that we are always looking for the best scholarship opportunity for the student. So if you end up even sending it to us and your GPA is going to give you a better scholarship than your GPA and your test score combined, we're going to err on the side of looking at only your GPA. We'll only consider your test score if it is going to help you. We never want it to hurt you.
That's perfect. Brian?
In some ways, we're kind of a hybrid of both of those. So for St. Xavier, it depends on the program of interest. So for our nursing program, competitive program, we still require the standardized test score. For all other programs, essentially, our test optional policy is a test blind policy. So we will look at high school performance for both admission decisions and also scholarship consideration.
Okay, great. Good. I hope that helps families. Again, the bottom line, as you can see, we got 3 different institutions, and they're kind of an example of everyone. They've got their own nuance to it, and so you do have to work with each of the admissions people at the institutions you're interested in.
Right, exactly. And the piece I would add, I spoke with a family just this week who was concerned, parents of a senior concerned about not having a test score. And knowing that, like, for instance, the entire Big Ten is test optional or test blind as an option this year, but they specifically wanted direct admission to the Kelley School of Business at Indiana University. And
right.
Direct admit to business at Kelley School at Indiana University required a test score. That apply now. It doesn't matter that the score is not going to come in for 4 to 6 weeks that they took today. That should not delay your application for admission. The family had some confusion about that. They're like, we can't apply until we have a score. No, you apply as soon as you can. The test score will be added to the file as soon as it's available. So don't let that delay any of those applications from happening. All right. I think we've made it through. Here's one question. For a merit scholarship, if it is awarded, a student's GPA goes down after it's awarded, could a scholarship be retracted?
It's been my experience at most schools that when a student receives a merit scholarship, if the GPA or if it does refer to the test score goes up, that merit scholarship could be increased. I have never seen an experience where the merit scholarship is reduced, however. So normally it's yes on the increase, normally not on the decrease. But again, I'm open to if the colleges have a different spin on that than what I just said, certainly chime in. But otherwise, I would suspect that that's probably the policy.
The one thing I would add to that is the majority of what we're looking at is going to be based off of end of junior year grades. So we really only want to see if your GPA increased. But keep in mind, if your GPA decreased or it's a class that maybe you did not pass, we are going to need your final transcripts and you're going to need to meet all graduation requirements. So that's where it could come into a little bit of concern, is if your GPA decreased because of a specific class that you needed for graduation, then you might get in a little bit of trouble. But I would back Frank up on it. We've never really seen anybody's scholarship decrease, because in that case, please don't send it to us. We don't want to hear that from you. We don't want to put you in that situation.
So
I have one more, Mike.
yeah, go ahead.
That just came in. Is the FAFSA filed once or every year?
So under the current domain, under the current regulation that we're working on now, FAFSA is a yearly document. So you're filing it every year a student is in college. There has been some, actually I was on a panel on this topic. There had been some conversation about going to a one-time FAFSA filing process. There's been a lot of debate about that. That has not happened yet. I don't know if it will happen. So it's best to just follow the current regulation, which is file FAFSA every year. I am going to kind of, suggest some things in relationship to the forecasting of where we're going to be. I think we're on the precipice in this aid system of some potentially monumental changes that might happen in the next several years. A lot of that will depend on what kind of an administration in this presidential election. But if indeed there is a change in administration, I think we're going to see some monumental changes going forward. So stay tuned every year if you're the parent of a freshman or a sophomore and you're at this seminar, because I suspect in a year or two, I'm going to be talking about some different elements here.
All right, I have one more question here, and we'll have this be the last one. I want to be respectful of everybody's time here tonight. And it says, do colleges give notice of admission and merit scholarships before early action deadlines or only after looking at all applications? So I guess kind of getting at that timing of admissions decisions, financial aid award letter decisions, and that kind of thing.
Sure. I'll give some general thoughts and then certainly allow each of the colleges to share what they do at their institutions. So my experience has been that you basically have two types of institutions in terms of how they handle this. There are some institutions, particularly the schools that are in the rolling process. In other words, it's rolling admissions and they make admissions decisions kind of as you go. Usually those institutions will create an admissions decision, an acceptance letter, and either at the same time or soon thereafter create a merit award. So that's one element. Then you have other institutions that hold applications for a period of time, batch everything to a particular deadline, and then read them all. And then typically it's only after that you get the admissions decision and then potentially merit-based scholarship either at that time or very quickly thereafter. So usually that's the twofold approach you see depending on how they view if it's rolling or whether it's a deadline and then batch them. And again, I'll allow each of the schools to comment on what they do.
St. Cedar's rolling admission, so we make admission decisions as we receive applications, and our merit scholarship information is included in the admission decision letter.
Very good. Thank you.
Yep. The University of Tampa operates exactly the same.
Thank you. Perfect.
Same with St. Ambrose.
All right. Very good.
All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for attending. Certainly thank all of our panelists for generously giving them some of their time and expertise tonight for our families. I am sharing all the contact information right now is up there on the screen. So I will leave that up there for a couple minutes for anybody who wants to jot down an email of anybody they want to reach out to for any further information. What I'll tell you is if you have specific questions about FAFSA, financial aid, whatever it is, you can reach out to the universities. You can reach out to Mr. Palmisani. you can always reach out to your school counselor at Hinsdale South as well. We can answer some of the basic questions, and we can also connect you to resources that might get you more specific information if you need it. So thank you to our panel. Thank you for coming, and enjoy the rest of your night.